Hello, viewers of The Pioneer. How are you doing? I hope you're healthy and well. Today, I will again convey a very interesting developments regarding the Russia-Ukraine war. Our old followers will remember. A few months ago, we stated that we expected that the problems in the Russian army would increase with the arrival of the winter season. Of course, the Ukrainian army is also facing the same winter conditions, but the Ukrainian army is equipped by the Ukrainian state. Therefore, they don't face as difficult situation as the Russian army. In the Russian army, on the other hand, there are problems in terms of all kinds of equipment. This situation is now clearly visible. The equipment crisis can be solved somehow. Cold protection methods can be created. However, there are some problems that cannot be solved with the cost of the Russian army dearly. According to the reports that have emerged recently, rats and rodent-borne diseases and losses due to these diseases have increased in the Russian army. There are a big panic at the Russian headquarters. So what are the remarkable developments regarding the Russian armies? Let's examine it together. As the Pioneer team, we continue to bring the Russia-Ukraine war to your screens. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so as not to miss our daily map reports and reports on the agenda. I also read all your comments on our videos. Please continue to express your opinions about our content in the comments. Thank you for your nice comments. Let's start if you are ready, the Pioneer reports. As you know, there are several problems in the Russian army that have become chronic. The most important of these is that the rats that have started to establish a habitat for themselves on the front line, trenches and positions. The most important of these is the rats that have started to establish a habitat for themselves on the front line, trenches and positions. As we mentioned earlier, winter conditions are now prevailing on the front line. Therefore, these rats are trying to find a living space for themselves in these conditions. Russian soldiers also set up warm areas for themselves in order not to be affected by the cold on the front line and store their food and drink supplies in these areas. Thanks to their advanced senses, the mice can easily identify the areas where the Russian soldiers' food is located. After that, rats usually start to consume the supplies of the Russian soldiers in these areas. Because of where they live, rats harbor many microbes that can make people sick. The problem is right here, because many Russian soldiers were sickened and hospitalized due to the rats' fever diseases carried out by rats. The Ukrainian Military Intelligence Directorate recently shared a very striking information with the public. According to the information, rat fever disease infected a large number of Russian soldiers due to the lack of winter clothing and inadequate medical care. Moreover, many of these soldiers left the front line and were transferred to the hospitals. According to the Ukrainian Military Intelligence, it is not yet known how many Russian soldiers are suffering from this disease. Ukrainian Military Intelligence made the following statements about the situation in question. The disease is viral in nature and transmitted from the rodents to the humans through the direct contact with a pathogen, inhalation of the dust from the rat feces, or contamination of the food consumed by humans. Complaints about the fever by the Russian army personnel involved in the war against Ukraine were ignored by the commands, which saw them as another manifestations of the avoiding participations in combat operations. The outbreak of rat fever occurred near the city of Kupiansk in Kharkiv Oblast, as a result of which the combat capability of 6 Russians were significantly reduced. Symptoms of rat fever include severe headaches, rashes fever, low blood pressure, joint pain and swelling, nausea and vomiting. In the early stages of the disease, it often resembles an ordinary flu, and because if its disease affects the kidneys, a person infected with the rat fever experiences severe lower back pain and severe difficulty urinating. This is how rat fever is described in the reports of the Ukrainian military intelligence. As can be seen, it is a highly threatening and dangerous disease. When we look at the situation of the Russian army, we can say that the effects of these diseases are quite severe. We have stated many times in our previous reports, many soldiers in the Russian army complained that the Russian war leadership did not provide the necessary equipment. We can say that this situation has been proved once again with the spread of the rat fever. the Russian Ministry of Defense and the Russian General Staff did not make any statements about the report. Russian sources stated that the Russian troops made progress in the region where the outbreak occurred. However, local sources claim that the rat flu epidemic in the Russian army has reached a very severe dimension. We can say that with the Ukrainian army making progress in the region in the coming days, the rat flu issue will be fully clarified. Recently, the Chief of Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces published a report. According to the report, the Russian armed forces have lost approximately 19,550 military personnel so far this month alone. With the losses of October and November are added to these losses, the number reaches approximately 70,000. This is really quite a serious number. The Russian army has suffered a very high number of losses in such a short period of time. Moreover, December has not yet ended. By the end of December, the 3 months loss of the Russian army could reach 100,000. According to allegations, this number of casualties is the highest number of casualties that the Russian army has reached in the short period of time during the war that has been going on for nearly 2 years. Another detail that draws attention in the reports shared by the Ukrainian sources is that one of the biggest rivals of the Russian army is the winter conditions. As we have just mentioned, winter conditions bring many difficulties. If there is not enough preparations, many soldiers perish. In the worst case scenario, even if the rat fever disease becomes an epidemic and spreads among the Russian soldiers, it will increase the losses of the Russian army extraordinarily. It is precisely in this process that the Ukrainian army first will have to review their new war strategy. As you know, the Ukrainian armed forces have turned the war into the war of attrition. At many points, the Ukrainian armed forces are not launching new attacks. Rather, they are responding to the attacks by the Russian armed forces, and this is working. We think that the Ukrainian army should adopt this strategy for a while longer. The reasons we have just mentioned will naturally increase the losses of the Russian army. The Ukrainian armed forces should cause more losses to the Russian army with the strategic attacks. In this way, the necessary environment needed for the next offensive of the Ukrainian army will be created. The information of this environment will determine the fate of the war. We mentioned that the losses of the Russian army are increasing. Let's take a look at the losses of the Russian army according to the latest data. 350,000 military personnel, 5,828 tanks, 1,825 armored vehicles, 8,226 artillery systems, 932 multiple rocket launcher systems, 611 air defense systems, 6,342 unmanned aerial vehicles, 324 fighter jets, 324 helicopters,